Good morning. My name is Ernie Orchard. I'll be directing and documenting the testing for the water intrusion at Dr. Chen's residence. We have been informed that there are 6 separate leak locations. Leak location number 1 is in the living room, and the point of water intrusion is through the ceiling. We have damage to the ceiling finishes and water staining on the carpet. We are now set up below leak number 2 in the master bedroom, and the evidence of the leak is the discolored carpeting. The ceiling's already been repaired by the doctor because she didn't want to stare at the ceiling damage. The location of the stain suggests that the point of intrusion is a little more than 6 feet back from the atrium courtyard and a little more than 8 feet in from the return wall off of the living room. Our third leak is found in the master bathroom and is evidenced by the stain on the carpet. Here again, the doctors had the ceiling repaired similar to the damage that was found in the master bedroom. But this location is approximately 3 feet inboard from the inside corner of the atrium courtyard that was in the background from leak number 2. We are now set up in the kitchen at leak number 4. So we've got some splitting on the seams at the ceiling where the ceiling was repaired, similar to that in the master bedroom and bath. And the mark on the floor shows that the leak is below the can light that is just in front of the stove top. This is about 10 feet in from the exterior wall, and the garage is to my immediate left. The cameraman's now going to pan around to his left, our right, and we will view leak number 5, which entered just at the chandelier above the dining room or dining nook, and the mark on the floor shows that the leak is just inboard of the exterior wall next to the drive and just inboard approximately 6 feet from the atrium cover. We are now set up in the laundry room, and here again the doctors had the ceiling repaired, but we've marked a floor to show where the water landed, which is right in front of the laundry sink. And at this location we're about 5 feet in from the pedestrian door that exits off of the kitchen, and about 2 feet inboard from the door that leads into the maze room. We are now set up in the entry alcove, and we will be panning to our right, your left, and you will see the protection that's been set up by the testing crew prior to commencement of the water test. So once we begin with our water testing, we'll make sure that none of the interior finishes, furnishings, or belongings are damaged. For this setup, we are now located on the back side of the swimming pool, so we can show a wide-angle view of the rear elevation of the residence. At the large window wall, that is on the exterior side of leak number 1 in the living room. As we pan slightly to the left, you can see the return wall, which is the part of the master bedroom, and leak number 2 is just inside that return wall. Leak number 3 is in the master bathroom, which is just behind the backside of the little atrium courtyard. Now we'll pan back to leak number 1, and then we will continue our pan around to the right, where we will pick up leak location number 5 in the breakfast nook area. We're now set up at the roof, and we're going to begin with a pan that starts from the back corner of their garage and then pans around to your right, our left, across the entrance elevation for the home, and then along the side of the house, which this roof section is above the kitchen. We'll continue our pan around to the right over the dining room area, and we'll pick up the atrium cover over the pool deck. As the camera continues to move, you'll pick up Mr. Matson in the background, and he is standing over the location for leak number 1. This will be the location of our first water test. As Mr. Matson moves, he's going to locate himself above leak number 2, which is at a lower section of roof, and the membrane that's in service at this area was installed by the contractor that built the atrium cover. Mr. Matson will now move over to leak area number 3, which is at an older gravel surfaced section of roof, and it is again in close proximity to the atrium cover. Now, leak number 4 will be all the way back around to our left, your right, and will be at a lower roof elevation on an older section of built-up roof that again has the gravel surfaced finish. The common denominator for leak number 4 is the leak number 4 and 6, is the electrical conduit that is carried underneath the solar panels and was installed by the contractor that built the atrium cover. Leak number 5 is above the breakfast nook, and that leak appears to be directly related to a previous roof repair, and we'll show that in the next setup. Leak number 6 is in close proximity to the electrical conduit that was installed above the laundry room, and at each one of these electrical conduits the flashing is set on top of the membrane in cold process roofing. We are now at our second setup at the roof, and we are located above leak area number 2 and number 3. Mr. Matson has got his tape out. The general contractor's superintendent reports that when there is a lot of water on the roof, it ponds right at the base of this wall directional change. And as we can see with the tape measure, the Z-bar counter flashing, which is a piece of sheet metal that tucks up and under the stucco, is only about 3.5 inches above the roof deck. And the superintendent reports that the water ponds to 2.5, possibly 3 inches deep. To my right, you can see where the contractor that built the atrium cover has installed a tapered insulation and a torch-applied modified membrane, and has actually built up the roof area above the master bedroom where leak number 2 occurs. Leak number 2 is entering the building at approximately where my right foot is, but it is believed that the water intrusion point is actually at the low spot at the wall directional change, and water's been allowed to run under the membrane and then drop down into the area, because this roof was following the same slope as the old gravel surface. So any water getting underneath would actually travel back to the approximate center and pond there the longest. The cameraman will now pan around to my left, your right, and we will see again the electrical conduit with flashing set on top of the old roof. We also have a Z-bar counter flashing below the plate line or the curb for the atrium, and here the elevation is about 3 inches, and in the corner we find that there is a wall directional change with a complex intersection, no cant strip, and the weather seals are made with roofer's mastic. Where did you see the exposed framing? Now, where Mr. Matson's pointing, there's exposed framing underneath the Z-bar, so that also presents a possible water intrusion point. The built-up roof that Mr. Matson is kneeling on was installed by the atrium contractor, and here again we find base flashing set on top of the membrane, and it's my understanding that these electrical conduits were also installed by the general contractor for the atrium cover. Our next setup is going to be on the other side of the home, above the kitchen, laundry room, and breakfast nook area. Before we move on, there's a couple of other items that are worthy of note. Here we're showing a wide-angle view in the long axis section for the lower roof with the garage in the background. And what we find is the roof slope actually runs from the perimeter to the wall elevation transition where Mr. Matson is located, instead of the reverse where it was intended to drain into a gutter and downspout system. Where Mr. Matson is located is what we spoke about briefly before, where water ponds up against the base of that wall. Here you can see again that the vertical elevation to the break for the Z-bar is about 3.5 inches, and water stands with about a 3-foot or 3-inch deep puddle for an extended period of time right at this location. We are now set up so we can track the path for the electrical conduit, and as you can see in this shot, the conduit runs underneath the solar panels, drops down onto this lower gravel surfaced built-up roof membrane, and then goes in 2 different directions. The direction that we're currently focused on is adjacent to the atrium cover, and here you can see that the conduit runs parallel to the side of the atrium cover, and then Mr. Matson is now pointing underneath the Z-bar counter flashing where we find there's exposed wood framing. We believe that this is at least one potential water intrusion point, and this is working in conjunction with the conduit that runs off to the side of the building. We also have the roof jacks that are set on top of the membrane. And another concern that has been raised by the superintendent for the general contractor is the way in which the satellite dish is mounted and where the service lines are protected by a piece of ceramic pottery. So when we move the ceramic pottery, we find that the junction box is set directly on the gravel surface built up, and then the cables are run through a conduit opening that does not have a weather seal. This is in close proximity to the area in which the contractor reports long-term standing water, just at the base of the elevation change. Now we will set up above the kitchen area and show the roof conditions above leaks 4, 5, and 6. We are now set up with a wide-angle view over the kitchen and laundry room, and as the cameraman zooms in, We're going to pick up Mike Matson where he's standing above the roof area directly over leak number 4. And what you see is Mr. Matson is pointing to a 4-inch by 4-inch patch that was installed over the built-up membrane to cover up a core cut through the membrane, and the patch was not properly detailed. Normally the gravel surface would be removed and a 6x6 patch installed. So the patch is undersized and improperly installed. We will have to do a document search to find out who took the core cuts, but this cut is almost identical to the one that we found in the new modified membrane in the upper roof section. Mr. Matson will now walk over to our right, your left, to the roof area above leak number 5. And here we find there's an asphalt emulsion coating that's been installed over the membrane where the gravel surface has been swept back. And again, we have a Z-bar counter flashing at the base of the elevated roof that is very close to the finished roof elevation. It is our belief that the leak source is the low flashing and possible ponding that is spilling over the top of the base flashing. Our last leak location, which we've identified as number 6 and is found above the laundry room, is in close proximity to the roof jacks that are in front of Mr. Matson. And both of these roof jacks are set on top of the gravel surfacing in cold process mastic. So leak number 6 is believed to be associated with the electrical conduit installation. We will now start with the water test at leak number 1. Before we set up for the water test, I wanted to show one more angle on what we believe is leak number 5. Here the cameraman is showing wide angle for the roof to wall transition at the wall directional change, and he's now going to zoom in to the Z-bar flashing where Mr. Matson has the tape measure set up. Here again we find that the horizontal leg of the Z-bar is about 3.5 inches above the roof to wall transition, and there is a copious amount of roofer's mastic that's been forced up and under the Z-bar, and it is our considered opinion that the origin of leak number 5 is right here at this complex intersection for the wall directional change. Okay, test number 1 is above leak number 1, and our start time is approximately 11:50 a.m. We will run water on the base of the pole supports for the panel rack for approximately 20 minutes. Or until we get a reported leak. At approximately 12:06, which would be about 16 minutes after the water test started, there's reported water intrusion at test number 1. And the point of intrusion is believed to be one of the vertical supports for the panel array closest to the garage. One of our concerns is now that the water test has been running for almost 19 minutes, water still has not migrated to the roof perimeter where the gutters and downspouts are. Instead, we have a large pond that's developing at the center of the roof, and it appears that the water is approximately 1.5 inches to 2 inches deep. Based on this condition, we will return 48 hours from now to determine whether or not the water actually ponds, and to what extent, if in fact it does. We are now looking at one of the flashings for the panel array, and we see that there's some haphazardly applied caulking at the interface between the self-leveling and the penetration. This shoe appears to be the most likely leak source, as it is the closest shoe above the water intrusion point to the interior. The water test has been terminated after 20 minutes, and what we note is that none of the water that's been sprayed onto the roof has migrated to the perimeter drainage. So we have a large puddle in the center of the roof. We are now set up on the interior of the home below water test number 1, and it is approximately 12:40. So our water test has been going for a little more than 50 minutes. The leak has been dripping for approximately 30 minutes, and as we can see right now, it's coming in through the diagonal sheathing and then dropping right where my hand is into a bucket below. So we've got a fair amount of water coming in, and this water will not stop dripping until the pond of water is swept away. So we have a combination problem. We've got a penetration through the waterproof barrier that's resulting in damages to the interior finishes and furnishings. And instead of being a short-term leak, it is long-term because there is standing water above that's providing head pressure. We're going to have the crews sweep the water off the roof, and hopefully that will stop the leak.